Trail cameras are a vital part of my scouting and hunting plan in the big woods for mountain bucks. I run my trail cameras almost year round, besides really just the spring and early summer. The data that I get from these trail cameras can be extremely useful for future hunts if you learn from that data. I utilize different strategies for deploying cameras depending on the different time of year and experience in a particular area. So when I'm looking at all of these areas, if I hunt the same area year after year, it becomes slightly stale to me over time. And I almost feel like I get lazy because you feel like you know the same spots and this is what you need to do to be successful. I like to challenge myself a little bit and go to different spots and check those out. So when I'm looking at new areas, I look at them from a 3-year strategy. You can be successful the first time into any spot, don't get me wrong, but to really learn and understand the area, I believe it takes around 3 years to be able to do that. And I use trail cameras to keep track of deer movement in these new areas year round. So where to place the trail cameras? The springtime is my favorite time of year to get out and scout new areas, being able to see that sign from the previous season. Scrapes, rubs, beds, all those things are usually pretty visible and allows you to be able to paint a picture in your mind of what that deer movement might have been like last October. Since the time is valuable to all of us and we can't always revisit an area that until it's time to hunt from the initial scout, I always carry trail cameras with me, even when scouting in the spring. And I think it's safe to say that most of us are using our vacation time to be able to hunt in and around the rut. With that being said, I'm leaving up my cameras in areas in hopes of getting photos in October, November. So even though I'm setting them up in the spring, they're set up with a purpose for that October, November timeframe. So by positioning my cameras on scrapes, signpost rubs, trails, funnels, I have the best odds of seeing what is there throughout the fall. Of those three, I have more cameras on scrapes than anywhere else at all times of the year. The licking branch of a community scrape is used by all deer year round to be able to communicate by rubbing their forehead glands, their preorbital glands, and their saliva on that branch as a communication tool. Throughout the fall months, they will actually paw up the ground, making the scrape that you traditionally see in the woods. The fact that these community scrapes can create a communication hub makes for an excellent place to place your trail cameras. In addition to utilizing scrapes and trail crossings, I also like to hang my cameras on different elevation levels and terrain features to ensure I'm covering as much as possible. In some of the mountainous regions of the Appalachian range, the deer will move at different elevations depending on the food of that time of year. If you get a bad acorn crop on the tops, but the middle to lower elevations are loaded with them, then your camera on the top of the hill might seem dead. And that doesn't mean that there's not any deer in there. I like to have at least one camera on the top of the hill, one towards the upper third on a bench or side hill trail scrape, one towards the bottom third, and one in the creek bottom on a crossing or a community scrape if possible. The strategy of spreading out my cameras isn't necessarily going to really help you pattern a specific deer, but it will help you understand how the deer are using that terrain and the specific elevations. If you do find a specific deer that you want to learn more about, you can try to figure out where he is bedding by combining the trail camera data with looking at the onX Hunt app and maps to figure out where you need to pay attention more and get boots on the ground going into the second and the third seasons. Some of these areas that I'm scouting, I plan to hunt them this year and others are for the future. So you have to kind of keep that in mind on what your goals are and what your strategies are going forward. The cameras I'm setting up can help with that current season, but are mostly to learn for the following years. In the big woods, bucks will often visit the same areas year after year, and some scrapes get hot near the same time. So keep that in mind as you're going forward by logging that data. I'm going to show a couple examples on the onX Hunt app on how I am setting up cameras. So to give an example of a particular area, now I am just going to mark these as I'm looking at a web map, but this is an example in the field. This is kind of how my camera setup may look, but this is not exact. So when I was doing some scouting and some other videos, I had marked different locations of points of interest. I had marked a scrape up in this spot towards the top of the hill on the edge of this clear cut. So what I would do is go in, edit that. If I were in the field, I would be doing this on the Hunt app on my phone, and mark that trail cam. Let me see here, trail cam 001, and then I would come in and put the trail camera icon. I mark all my trail camera icons in light blue so I can go back and filter that at a later date and see where all my cameras are. I will take a photo of that camera on the tree with my phone and log it into the Hunt app attached to that waypoint, and then I'll add notes. So I'll say I have Exodus lift 2 camera, the date that I put it out, full battery, so try to keep the battery life known there. I have a Python lock. If I have it high in the tree where I need a stick to be able to get to it, sometimes I'll put my cameras high in the tree, angled down to keep out of the sight of the deer and also other people. So need 1 step, and any other relative details, like, all right, on a big community scrape. Those are the types of things I would do, and I would save that. And then I will, all right, so I had a marking of a scrape down a little bit lower here. This is maybe a spot that I would switch out for a camera as well. And just to save time, I won't add all the details in this one, but I would repeat the steps that I did in the first one. So trail camera 02, mark it, color code it, boom, got it. All right, and then I would try to find one down on the lower part, and that may be, say, on this ridge. It could be on a separate ridge. I'm trying to walk these different elevation lines to be able to understand it. Right here at a potential travel corridor marked, so maybe I want to throw a camera there and see what's going at that elevation line. Not that far below the other one, but enough that it could create different travel patterns. All right, and then I would want one, say, in the bottom. So I had an apple tree marked over here. Maybe there's a big community scrape underneath it. Who knows? Until you get in there, but go through, mark that, trail cam 04, add the notes, photos, all that. Boom. All right, now you see this is how I'll go into a new area. I got these cameras set up at these different elevation lines, and one of the things that you can do is you can go in and you can filter by specific camera. So you can go through and focus waypoints from new to old, but that's not what I want to do. I want to go to the filter, not the sort tool, and I want to clear all waypoints, go in and just select the trail camera icon. See filtered results, click out of there. You got rid of all the other clusters. So if I were to be scouting a whole bunch of different areas, I can go through and just see where my cameras are laid out and go in. And then after a year, and I realized, okay, this camera on this elevation line was really hot, and this buck seemed to be coming from somewhere a little bit further away. It was after dark. Maybe I need to start moving some cameras around the ridge on this side, but more on this topography line. And that's all dependent on that specific area. Maybe you have an idea where a buck might be bedding, but you're not sure how he's leaving that bedding area. You can cluster cameras around those specific bedding areas. A bunch of things as you move forward into year 2 and 3. But to start out, I like to cover an area at all of those different elevation points. If you have bigger mountains, it might be focused, might be spread out a little more. If you're on in some hill country that only has a couple 100-foot elevation, maybe you can cover all that area with 2 cameras or 3 cameras, or you want to put one around a different ridge. Just try to have them spread out in different type of habitat and terrain locations to be able to understand that movement fully. All right, so I'm out in the field and I wanted to show an example of a place that I would run a trail camera throughout the year and to be able to gather that data. If I go into a brand new spot, I want to cover as much of the different elevation spots as I possibly can. And say if an area doesn't have as much elevation, it's a little more flat, some gradual hills and places like that, then I want to focus more on the vegetation side of it. But I'm trying to get the most bang for your buck on being able to figure out what kind of deer live there and when they're traveling through that. So for the first year, I'm setting them up on different elevation points, on big community scrapes. That's my main focus. That's going to be the place where I'm going to get the most photos throughout the year. And those places can be where a lot of trails cross. It can be on a side hill bench. It can be out on a point. It can be on the edge of a clear cut. In this situation, we've got a side hill bench and a vegetation edge. So we have some hemlocks, and then we also have some open hardwoods here on this bench towards the top of the hill. I want to focus on those areas for the most part because community scrapes are a place that all of the deer are using as a communication tool. They're rubbing their forehead glands, their preorbital glands, their saliva. They're rubbing all of that on that licking branch. The pawing of the ground is a part that I focus more on in October and November. It's the branch that's the key to these scrapes and why it's such a good tool all around. So I want to put those or find those in the best traveling areas at those different elevations. So say on the upper third of the mountain on one bench, I had the most buck activity or specific buck that I'm looking at, and I didn't have it down towards the bottom, and maybe I had him once on the top. Well, I want to focus more around these areas and figure out, okay, was he a couple hours after dark? Maybe he's coming from a little bit further away. Maybe he's bedding that way. I want to scout those areas, find that out. All right, maybe I found some great thick cover out on this point. Well, then I want to find a scrape right off of the edge of that cover or good trails that are coming out of it and run a camera there and just start adding to that, but working that same topography line, the same type of terrain, same type of vegetation that you found the original one in, and continually molding that over a strategy of years and building until you learn a specific buck or just how bucks in general use an area. If I find an area that looks great and there might not be a scrape there already, I'll make a mock scrape. So I'll just take my boots and paw up the ground and have a licking branch above, either break it off if there's one there, or in the example that I have here, I have a branch that, well, there was no branch over it, but it was just the perfect spot, you know, when you find it, where a bunch of trails are crossing and you feel like there should be a scrape there. So I took a branch that had fallen off of the tree and hung it over top of another one down and right in front of the path. Literally this branch blocks the path essentially, and running a camera on that is able to help me identify the deer that are in that area. And on the specific example, I've done test runs with it. I've been able to figure that out, that the deer are using this one, and it's kind of cool to see when you make your own scrape and then to see the deer use it as it's one of their own. It's pretty rewarding. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's why you run cameras in multiple different locations to be able to identify what's the best for that specific area. Now, once you have some data, what you're doing with that trail camera data, instead of just looking at, okay, there's a buck in this photo, a nice deer, you want to take that data, put it on your computer, log it in. Well, first, before you even log it, you want to put it in folders that are easily accessible. Find your own way to be able to organize those. Back up those files and then log it in either a Microsoft Excel sheet, or what I use is Google Sheets that I can access anywhere.
I'm logging the date and the time, the identification that I name for a buck so it's easily trackable. I'm putting the weather data, and I'm putting any other pertinent notes in there that's possible. Then I'll apply a sort layer on there so I can sort it by specific buck, specific date, whether it was daylight or nighttime, and to really be able to help me move forward with learning that buck, be able to take that trail camera data and apply it to how I'm going to strategize my cameras next year, and more importantly, how I'm actually going to hunt those areas. One of the things that is really helpful for real-time data. So trail cameras are really helpful for me for learning for future years, but it's not as much for that current year. It can be helpful, but I think I utilize that data more for the following year, unless I have an area that has cell reception and I can utilize cell cameras. So I use my Exodus render all of the time in most of the areas that I hunt. I only have cell reception on the tops of the hills or on that upper third, which many times is where I'm actually hunting at. So that's very helpful. By running that camera on that, you get in real-time data. So if it's during the early season, then you're able to see, okay, if you have it on a scrape that's leaving a bedding area heading to, say, a ridge that's full of acorns, you can kind of look at some patterns there to be able to help you apply it to, say, your weekend hunt or after work or whatever that might be. And then if it's during the rut or the pre-rut, you're starting to see as areas are heating up. Every place is just a little bit different. You could be 10 miles down the road and an area heats up differently. So you're able to say, okay, my camera here is setting off. Last night I had a bunch of bucks and I have a cold front coming through. Maybe that'll make them move in daylight. That's where that render can really help you, and that cell camera can really help you get that data to apply it right now during the season. All areas are different, and you just need to be able to apply the knowledge that you learn to be able to predict in other areas and let the camera data tell you what that information is doing for you.